Have you ever heard the name Joseph Stalin? Iosif Vissarionovich Dzhugashvili, or better known as Joseph Vissarionovich Stalin, was one of the most famous leaders of World War II after Adolf Hitler. Stalin is also known as a communist icon and a mass-murdering tyrant. Stalin was born into poverty at the end of the 19th century. After joining the Bolshevik faction and carrying out the October Revolution, he rose through the ranks and became General Secretary, establishing himself as dictator of the Soviet Union after Vladimir Lenin's death. He then began to drag the Soviets into the modern era with rapid industrialization, which inadvertently triggered a fatal famine. Millions of people. Before deploying his famous Red Army to defeat the Nazis in World War II, Joseph Stalin did commit many atrocities, but that doesn't make him a one-dimensional man. Here are 8 interesting facts about Joseph Stalin, the dictator of the Soviet Union. 1. Change your own date of birth. It is said that Stalin was born at the end of the 19th century. Official records from Russia state that he was born on December 18, 1878 in Gori, Georgia, Russian Empire. Meanwhile, according to the old Julian calendar used by Russia at that time, Stalin's birthdate was December 6. Shortly after joining the Bolshevik faction, Stalin changed his own birthdate to December 21, 1881, to confuse the Tsar's secret police. Initially, he aimed to erase their true identities from their official documents and records. However, this step has even confused some historians who want to determine his original birth date. 2. His mother sent him to seminary to study to be a priest. In December 1895, Stalin's mother sent him to a seminary in the Georgian capital, Tiflis, now Tbilisi. This prevented Stalin from entering politics. Had he actually become an ordained priest in the Russian Orthodox Church, initially he was excited to attend a theological seminary in Tbilisi on a full scholarship. But the corruption and lack of religious feeling he witnessed made him doubt, and then lose his faith. Stalin also stopped studying the scriptures, instead reading the writings of Karl Marx and joining a local socialist group. Eventually he became an atheist, and in 1899 he was expelled from the seminary for not attending his final exams. 3. Stalin is not his real name. Stalin was born with the name Iosif Vissarionovich Dzhugashvili. Like other Russian revolutionaries, including Vladimir Lenin and Leon Trotsky, he later adopted aliases that are now better known than his real name. He has also used many pseudonyms such as Koba, Sasilo, and Ivanov, according to documents from the BBC. He eventually changed the spelling of his first name from Iosif to Joseph, his patronymic to Vissarionovich, and then adopted Stalin as his surname. Stalin literally means man of steel. 4. Once lived in the Kremlin with Lenin and Trotsky. After the October Revolution in 1917, the 3 top leaders of the Bolshevik Party, Lenin, Trotsky, and Stalin, became part of the informal group that led the new Bolshevik government. In March 1918, the center of Soviet government was moved from Petrograd, St. Petersburg, to the Kremlin, Moscow, due to the World War that was still raging. At that time, these 3 men lived in the Kremlin with Yakov Sverdlov, who later died in 1919. 5. Became the de facto dictator of the Soviet Union. When Lenin died in 1924, he was succeeded by Alexei Rykov, who served as chairman of the Council of People's Commissars and head of government. Stalin, at that time, remained general secretary of the Soviet Communist Party, but began to promote himself as Lenin's true political successor. After Lenin's death, a fierce power struggle broke out between Stalin and the more idealistic Trotsky. Before he died, Lenin himself said that Trotsky should replace Stalin as general secretary of the Communist Party. By the late 1920s, Stalin had established himself as supreme leader of the party and became the de facto leader of the Soviet Union, Although there is some debate as to when the Soviet system of government evolved from an oligarchy to a dictatorship under Stalin, Stalin ultimately won the battle with Trotsky and exiled him to Kazakhstan in 1928 before deporting him from the Soviet Union the following year. 11 years later, on August 21, 1940, Stalin gave orders to Jason Menard to kill Trotsky in Mexico City. 6. Developed his own brand of Marxism and modernized the Soviets. Like Lenin before him, Stalin also had his own interpretation of Marxism. In the case of Stalinism, the interpretation very nationalistic and focused on building the Soviet Union, not on global revolution. In 1935 to 1936, Stalin oversaw the process of formulating and establishing a new constitution. While introducing this constitution, he announced that socialism, which was the first stage of communism, had basically been realized in the Soviet Union. In 1938, the book History of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, Bolsheviks, or better known as the Short Course, was published. A number of biographies of Stalin were also published, although Stalin actually wanted them to depict him as the embodiment of the Communist Party rather than describe his own life story. Fearing that communism would fail if the Soviet Union was not modernized, from the late 1920s Stalin began initiating a series of 5-year plans for the industrialization of the still, slightly, feudal Soviet state. Under his leadership, coal, oil and steel production grew exponentially, and the Soviets achieved great economic growth. But these profits came at a huge human cost as well. People were forced to leave their homes to work in factories, where they worked in terrible conditions. At least 5 million people are believed to have died during this industrialization process. 7. Ordered the Katyn massacre in 1940. As one of the cruelest dictators in history, Stalin is always associated with the deaths of millions of people as a result of his policies. Among them were 22,000 Polish prisoners of war who were executed by the Soviet secret police, NKVD, in April and May 1940 in the Katyn forest. This massacre was carried out on Lavrentiy Beria's proposal to execute all members of the Polish officer corps on March 5, 1940. This document was later approved and signed by the Soviet Politburo, including Joseph Stalin. The Soviets initially blamed Nazi Germany for the massacre, and only admitted it in 1990, 1 year before the Soviet Union collapsed. 8. His eldest child died in a Nazi concentration camp. In 1941, Germany invaded the Soviet Union and started a war on the Eastern Front of Europe after Hitler broke the peace pact with Stalin. Shocked by this attack, Stalin immediately formed the Supreme Military Command, Stavka, with Georgy Zhukov. Stalin even issued Order No. 270, which ordered soldiers who were in danger of being captured by the enemy to commit suicide or fight to the death, and stated that those who were captured were traitors. Stalin's son from his first marriage, Yakov Zhukashvili, was a member of the Red Army during World War II. Sadly, he was captured during the Battle of Smolensk in June 1941. The Nazis proposed exchanging him for Marshal Friedrich Paulus, but Stalin refused, replying, "I will not exchange a marshal for a lieutenant." Stalin believed that Yakov had surrendered voluntarily, even though in reality their relationship had never been harmonious. Yakov finally died in the Sachsenhausen concentration camp in 1943. His radical thinking and merciless attitude were indeed a scourge for the Western Bloc during the Cold War. However, it needs to be acknowledged that Stalin was the person who contributed to stopping Hitler from expanding throughout Europe during World War II. Those are just 8 facts about Joseph Stalin. Hopefully they can add new knowledge to you and increase your historical knowledge. If this content is useful for you, don't forget to like, share and subscribe to this channel. See you in the next video.